Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have another episode of the Remarriage series for you here today. I am interviewing Mindy Neal, and Mindy is a coach who works with women who are blending families. So she has been divorced and is happily remarried again. We're going to hear her dating story, and then we're going to talk about what it takes to blend a family. Welcome, Mindy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Could you please tell the audience who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your coaching business?
Yeah, so I'm Mindy Neal. Like you said, I coach women who are blending families. And that's because when I started blending my family, I found myself in a whole world of pain. I thought there was only one of two options for me, that I was either going to be in a marriage and family I didn't really want, like settling for something I didn't want, or I was going to be divorced again. And I never planned on getting divorced the first time. So it really felt like these were my only options. And so now that I have figured that out for myself and how to be really happy in my blended family, I love helping other women to find that place too. Because so many of the women I meet, they think those really are their only options. They're never going to have what they always wanted because they're not in that first traditional family anymore. And they think what they want is not possible. So that is why I decided to go on this journey and help other women find what I have found.
Oh my goodness. And this is so important because I have heard, like just with my clients and with women that I've talked to in my audience, the thought of blending a family often will keep them from dating. It'll keep them from getting started. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be, I don't want to have to deal with all of those problems. And so I'm not going to do it. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing how you did it, the awesome results you've gotten. But first, let's back up to, when you started dating after your divorce. Can you just tell us your story, your divorce, a little bit about your divorce story, and then how you dated, your thoughts about dating and how that worked out?
Yeah. So when my husband first moved out, I thought, no way I was ever dating again. I had no intention of doing so. My marriage had not been what I wanted it to be. And I just thought, you know what? I'm done with that. And when he did move out, it was like my whole home filled with light. And it was like all of the burdens had been lifted. I felt amazing. I was like, why would I ever get into that again? And as that period where you're separated and you're working through all the divorce stuff, and maybe you're going to court, which I did, doing all that, it was like the Lord just started to work on me. Like, no, you're definitely gonna be doing that. And he just started planting seeds. And I just knew deep down, like, being single forever was not what was the plan for me, even though I would have taken it any day. I loved being single. It was awesome.
Yeah. And you can be happy single and still want a partner.
Absolutely.
They're not opposing desires or opposing states of being in the world.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So how long after your divorce did you start dating? Like, did you deliberately start? Did you meet someone by chance? What happened there?
Pretty much as soon as the divorce was final, I was like, all right, I guess it's time. So I got on the dating apps and I joined some Facebook groups where like people in my area, similar age, that were also newly single. And I just kind of started meeting people. And I just thought, well, I guess might as well get out there.
And that's a lot of what people do. It's like, they're just like, oh, and I remember the first time I got on an app, I was, I don't know, I just like a little like, when you're a good person, you just think everyone out there in the world is a good person, right? On social media and on the app. So what was your initial experience doing that? Like just getting on the app and dating someone from a singles group, singles online group or single social media group? Like what happened?
You know what? I think it was kind of fun. I didn't have any single friends at the time because I'd been married for 15 years. I had kids. All of my friends were in the same kind of boat. And my friends loved getting together with me because it was like, our lives are boring. Tell us what it's like to be single. Tell us what's going on out in the dating world. And so I kind of approached it like, this is an adventure. I don't ever know what I'm going to get. I don't know if who's going to show up at this thing is who they look like online. I have no idea. It's just an adventure. And I was kind of just open to just having fun and
Yeah.
seeing what it brought me.
So Ted, give us a dating story. Give us one good one and one, I wonder how I got here story.
I think there are too many of both to even tell stories. You would show up at a restaurant, I always met people for safety out somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you would show up and never know what you were going to get. My husband, actually, this is one of my favorite stories. The very first thing he said to me in real life, not online, was, holy crap, you're short. So
nice.
He walked into the restaurant. I was standing there waiting. I'm only 5'1" and he is 6'4". And he just could not, like, his whole face, like everything. He was like, what?
I had a similar response to my now husband, because from his photo, he took this photo, one of the photos I really liked on his profile. There was stairs behind him and there was this building. So it was really hard to tell how tall he was. And I just really wanted someone tall. So the way the perspective was, he looked shorter than he is. And I was like, I was still waiting to give him a chance. But when I got to the restaurant, I was like, oh, he's taller than I thought.
Oh, good.
Oh, so good. So yes, I understand that moment where it's like, I was going to be okay with it, but yeah. And him being 6'4" and you 5'1", that's how many, that's almost like
it's a lot.
Foot and a half between you.
Yes. And even just the way he approached it, that seems like a terrible, first impression. Like you would never go out for this person again, but we had great conversation. So it was just pleasantly surprised, oh, we get along really well. We have great things to talk about. Who cares?
Yeah.
But when you're doing that online dating, you just never do know what you're going to get when you meet someone in person.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts about what you were going to get, or how did you deal with, oh, this didn't go so well? How did you work through not letting that become about you or affect you? I often work with women who will go on a date and then something happens, maybe that's not so great and not necessarily terrible, but maybe the other person says something that's not unkind or whatever. And they take that in, make it about them. Like, oh, I need to change this about myself in order to attract someone. Or I didn't attract this person because I wore red and he didn't like red. I need to stop wearing red. How did you handle just taking all of that input, good and bad, but still being who you were?
You know what? It's so interesting you bring that up. I didn't have a problem with that dating. It was when I got remarried and then my brain started doing that again. So there was something about that marriage relationship that I made all the things my new husband said, the facial expressions he had, the tone of voice he used. It took me all back to my first marriage. And that's when my brain was like, you're not enough. You're not lovable. It's totally you. No one is ever going to love you. And for some reason, when I was dating, I was like, I'm amazing. If they don't like me, they are missing out. So I don't know. It was so weird. When I was single, I felt so good about myself. And it's all that drama started after I got remarried.
Yeah. And it really does show that it's our thoughts.
Oh, totally our thoughts.
Different people can be in exactly the same situation and just have different thoughts about it. And that makes all the difference in how successful you are, how much you enjoy the process. You just really didn't feel like dating meant anything about you. You were like, I'm amazing. Whatever happens on this date, I'm still good.
Yeah. When I got on the dating apps, it was like, whoa, I'm a catch. I mean, when you're looking at what's out there, it's like, anyone is lucky to have me. I'm pretty awesome.
Yes. And that is so, and that's what I really want to convey to the listeners. Listen, all of you ladies, you're all catches. Seriously. If you are listening to this podcast, you're already a cut above.
Way above.
Way above. Don't let anyone give you any self-doubt at all. So, all right. So you dated a lot of people, kind of casually. I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily at the same time, but you just kind of gave everyone a chance. So how did you then meet your now husband?
We met in a Facebook group.
Okay.
So I didn't even have a full body picture. I didn't have on the app where you scroll through all the pictures because his profile was private. I had just his profile pic. He looked nice enough. He had a great smile. So
did he ask you out? Did he message you, or were you guys having a conversation?
Well, so this is what's so interesting. I love to think that everything always happens exactly as it's supposed to, because this particular Facebook group I had joined, I never I never did anything in that group. I didn't ever post. I didn't ever comment. It was mostly just scrolling and wondering how they had this much time to post in the Facebook group. Like, I'm like, don't you have jobs? We're all adults here. I don't understand. And I'm pretty sure the only time I ever commented was when I saw this post, and it wasn't even about anything important. It was like, what are your favorite things to do for fun? It was nothing. And for some reason, I just felt like, oh, I should stop and read this. Oh. And I read all the comments, and the only comment that I commented on was my husband's.
Wow.
Like, so it's like the only time I ever even interacted in this group. I was in there looking and just never felt anything. And it was just, I just felt drawn to that one post and that one comment. I commented, he messaged me. We talked for a second and he just asked me out. And he's like, I love to just meet people in person. You want to do it? And I was like, sure, let's go.
So this was a singles group, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't inappropriate for him to ask you out because everyone was kind of single.
Yes. Okay. It was a group specifically for people in my area, in my age group who were single.
Okay. Yeah. You know, we both went to the same coaching school, and there's a question that I guess we love to ask our clients, which is, how did you create that result? And I want to ask that just because it almost sounds like I don't want anyone listening to go like, oh, well, you know, I don't know which Facebook group to go into and which specific comment to comment on. It almost sounds like, well, it's magical, but there is something about being super aware of yourself and your emotions and your own, like when you are speaking to yourself, when you're deep down inside, you're like, I should do that. And you just allow yourself to do that. That creates this kind of result.
Yeah. It's like paying attention to yourself and having a good relationship with yourself so that when that intuition comes, you're willing to trust it.
Yes. You're listening to you, you know, because it's not magical. There is a process to creating those kinds of results.
Yeah. Listening to yourself, trusting yourself, and being open. I was so open during my whole dating journey. I didn't have like those solid, like, no, because my brain wanted to offer me all the ways everything was a bad idea. I was like, brain, we're just open for an adventure. It doesn't actually matter if this first date goes anywhere. At the very least, I'm going to meet a new interesting person. Even if interesting is what my brain thinks is terrible. I'm like, but brain, this person is really interesting. I wonder how they got to this point.
Right. We've never seen this kind of terrible before.
Right. It's so fascinating that people show up in the world this way.
Oh, I love it. That's so good. All right. So then he asked you out by DM. You went on that first date. What happened? Do you wonder exactly how divorced women just like you are meeting eligible men who want a real relationship and a commitment? They're doing it by dating with their core values. Your core values are the GPS that lead you to the partner you've been looking for. When you use your core values on dating apps, text messages, and at social events, you will easily connect with your true match partner without chasing, settling, or wasting time with non-committal men. I have taught exactly how to do this in the 2-hour Core Values Dating Blueprint course available on my website, shadecurry.com/dating. That's SADECURRY.com/dating. You will learn exactly how to identify your core values and use them on your dating profile, how to ask the right questions via text, and how to tell the right stories on dates so that you attract the right people and repel those who aren't right for you. If you're ready to meet your true match, hop over to shadecurry.com/dating or click the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
I was dating, like you said, casually. I don't know. It was like 5 or 6, like not dating, just going out on dates with 5 or 6 different guys, just very casually. And almost, I think it was after our second date. Like the first one was like, oh, maybe. And it was after our second date that I was like, there's something here that I have not felt with a single other person I've dated. And so I just stopped accepting other dates. I canceled a couple that I was like, I'm not really interested compared to this guy.
Yeah.
Like, no, thank you. I want to see where this one goes.
Right. Yeah. So tell us the rest of the story, because like second date, how did you get to know he was the one? Because I mean, second date, you're like, I really like this guy, but how do you know when he's the one? Like, I'm going to sign on the dotted line.
I think that's really more just listening to yourself, listening to your intuition, paying attention. I think also part of it was because I knew I could be happy single. Like I really knew I could be happy single forever.
Yeah.
And I also knew that being in a relationship is where I grow. Like that's my earth curriculum. That's where Mindy grows, is in that relationship. So I knew it would be harder. I knew I would grow more, but I also knew like there was no urgency. There was no desperation because I really loved being single. And in that place, it was so much easier to listen to myself because I wasn't trying to fulfill some hole. Like I wasn't trying to fill my needs or fill a hole in my life. Like that was done. I was full. I was whole. And this just feels right.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. How long after you met did you get married?
Oh, it was only like 6 months.
So you knew, you were like,
it was, I'm not kidding. After that second date, I was like, oh my gosh, like this feels so different from everyone I've dated.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. So then you date 6 months, you get married. Now, how many kids does he have?
He has 3 and I have 2.
2. Okay. So 5 altogether in your blended family. And did you do any work leading up to the marriage on thoughts about blending your family?
I think we both kind of just assumed it would work, which was very naive of us. I almost wonder if that's the way it needed to be for us to make this work. Because if I had known all the things, I may not have chosen it. I'm so glad I did. So sometimes we're given something like that's best for us.
True.
So that we'll do the thing.
Yes. Yes.
So I think if I had known, I may not have chosen it. But now on the other side, I'm so glad I chose it.
Yeah. A lot of my clients are like, hey, I need to go heal. And there is healing to be done after divorce before, getting married again. But I will often meet women who will be healing for years. And they're like, I'm going to circle back to you to work with you after I'm done healing. And I'm like, listen, there is some work that you need to heal that will not show up until you get on that app.
Or until you get remarried, which is where all of mine showed up.
Every step of the way, there is healing to be done. Literally, I walked into this podcast recording after a conversation with my husband about shame and how maybe there's some things we don't want to be, we don't want to be saying. Apparently triggers shame in different people. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we should totally work on that.
Yeah, it is a never ending process of just up leveling and growing and growing into the next version of ourselves.
Yeah. So let's talk about this process, like from where it started with you, kind of like maybe the minute you realized, hey, I have some work to do here. Like, what was that first moment that let you see that there was work that needed to be done?
I didn't even realize it was my work, honestly. I thought it was his. Like,
oh my God, that's so good.
For sure, you're doing this wrong. Your kids are doing it wrong. Your ex-wife is doing it wrong. I didn't know you guys were all going to do it wrong. If you all did it my way, this would be working out.
But Mindy, I kind of believe you. I feel that way about a lot of things.
That is where I was. We were in therapy, and I told my therapist, like, I'm drowning in pain over here. Like, he's got to stop doing these things. I had no idea. I hadn't found coaching yet. So I did not know my own brain was creating all of the pain. I thought for sure everyone needs to do this differently and then it will all work.
Yeah.
And so someone had referred me to Jody Moore's podcast, who is a life coach. And I started listening. I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. Maybe, and not from it's my fault, blame, shame place, but from if I'm creating all this with my brain, that means I can uncreate it with my brain. I can create something new. And that's the best news because I don't think my husband's going to change. And I don't think my stepkids are, and I don't think his ex-wife is, and I don't think my ex-husband is. I've tried changing these people. It's not working.
Right. And just that moment of acceptance of like, oh, it's like that the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can. It's like that nugget. The minute that sinks in, they're like, oh, there are some things I cannot change.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that I need to get divorced again.
Yes.
Yes, I can't change him. That doesn't mean I can't have what I want. That's where you have to play with your brain and figure out, what do I think what I want is him to do it this way. But what do I actually want? Like, what's behind that, which is usually a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
What we always want is how we're going to feel if they did that. So how can I give
Right.
myself that feeling with him
Mm-hmm.
still doing the things?
Yeah. Can you give an example? I don't know if your example was like dishes or like chores or, you know,
Yeah, one of the things
schedules.
that was so hard for me at the beginning was he would just make decisions about his kids and he wouldn't even tell me about it. And I had a lot of ideas about what a family is supposed to look like, what a partnership is supposed to look like. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, I can't love his kids if he doesn't let me be part of their life. Like if I'm not in on the decisions, if I'm not like playing a mom role, how am I supposed to love them like a mom?
Oh, wow. You
And
were
that sounded legit.
that
Like
sounded
I was
very
like,
heavy.
right. So that puts me in this like very powerless place of, well, crap, what
Yeah.
am I supposed to do then? Like, we're never going to be a family because I can't,
Yeah.
because I wasn't meeting that definition.
Yeah.
I was
And I
like,
mean, imagine the thought, I will never be a family. It's sort of like your life stretches out ahead of you with this painful prison sentence.
yes. And there were lots of those thoughts that sounded so pretty. Like families should love each other, or families are supposed to spend time together. I mean, they sound really nice, but if that's
Right.
not what reality looks like, they're so painful.
Yes, because you can never get from where you are to what is supposed to make you happy.
Right. And so it's just pain, pain, pain all the time.
Yeah. So
So
let's
it's happening
pause
to
on
let go
the
of that.
families should spend time together. Families should love each other thought. Like, I mean, even as I say it now, and I'm a coach and I I know that my thoughts create my results and some thoughts are painful. Um, when I think about families should love each other, now, of course, my brain at this point knows that, oh, okay, but what love looks like can be different. And our definition of love can be different from other definitions of love. But I want to look at like just when we have these statements that are floating around in the world, and then you have social media, and it's just pressing on how can, on our brains, like I'm failing. How can we like start to unwind that a little bit? Like so someone has a blended family and people aren't loving each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Just, I don't know. Anytime you have 4, 5, 6, 7 people together, it's like someone's not going to be loving someone in that moment. How can we go from families should love each other, and this is really painful and hard, and it's never going to work, to, well, I can accept this version of something different that's okay.
Mm-hmm. One of my the things that helps me the very most, and this is with my own kids, this is with my husband, this is in all my relationships. Anytime I'm focusing on the other person, I feel frustrated because I'm always thinking they should be doing it differently. It's putting that focus back on myself. So when we're talking about families should love each other, it's like, hold on, focusing on everyone else is not going to be helpful. My stepson may never love me, ever. That does not mean I can't love him. That does not mean I can't love our family. It doesn't mean I can't feel united as a family. It's putting the focus back onto me. Okay, no matter how he shows up, no matter what he says or doesn't say to me, no matter what he does or doesn't do in our home, how do I love? Because that's who I want to be. And it has nothing to do with him. Like, why would I let my stepkids or my husband's ex-wife decide what kind of person I get to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And another question that I'd like to ask in that scenario is, what results do I want to create?
Yeah.
Because creating the result of someone else loving me or doing something for me, like, okay, so that's not in my power to create that result. That doesn't go like in the model, that doesn't go in my results line. And so that always brings me back to, oh, well, if I'm creating the results, this is the result I want to create. And then it takes my mind right back to, how do I want to create that result? How can I create the result? What am I doing and thinking, feeling? How am I showing up in a way that does or doesn't create the result?
Right. And if the result I want is like love.
Yes.
Like, how do I create that for myself so that when I walk into my home, I feel love, so that when I'm taking action, it's coming from love. It's like creating that for myself instead of expecting everyone else to get on board, get with the program and love each other and do it the way I think it should be done.
Yeah. So when you do this work with other women, like obviously you've done this work and you feel good about, kind of like, all right, when things show up in my blended family, I know how to work through, I know how to navigate things that are showing up. What are the common situations that you find showing up for the families of your clients, and how do you help them navigate those situations?
So, I mean, it's dropping the word should altogether. Like in my program, that doesn't exist. We're like, should, that's not a real thing. It does not actually exist in the world. It doesn't, like, everything is made up. So it's willing to look at everything through that lens of this is all made up and I could very likely be wrong. And even almost wanting to be wrong, because as long as I'm right, like, for example, to be a family, you need to spend time together. Well, if your family isn't spending time together, maybe one of your stepkids doesn't ever want to come to your house, for example. Like, if you believe to be a family, you need to spend time together, you've just made it impossible to have the family you want. Right. So it's, as long as you're right about that quality time is a necessary ingredient, like, you're stuck, totally powerless, can't have what you want. But if you're wrong, what else is possible? What else is available? And getting to that point where you're like, oh, I hope I'm wrong. Like, what if we really could be a really happy family and my stepkid doesn't ever come to our house? What would that look like? What would be possible?
And I'm curious, what could that look like? For someone, I mean, hypothetically, for someone whose stepkid doesn't want to come to their house, like, if someone was to open up that window, what are some things that you found that come up for people when they let go of the should?
Yeah. The secret to relationships is knowing that your relationship with any person is your thoughts about that person. So if you have a stepkid that never comes over, but you only think amazing, loving thoughts about them, like, you've created this amazing relationship whether they ever come over or not. And you get to enjoy that relationship.
Yeah.
And you can do that without your stepkid ever being even involved in the process, because this is all, like, we create our own realities with our thinking. So if you're creating these amazing relationships by the thoughts you choose to think, you get to enjoy your family in this amazing way without anything having changed.
Yeah. And I know that might be a stretch for some people. Like, wait, but I want to hug them and I want to love them and I want to buy them gifts and talk to them.
So, like, the secret there is checking in with your body when you say that.
Right.
But I want to hug them. How does that feel? If it feels terrible, then maybe it sounds pretty. But if it feels terrible, it might not be one you want to choose.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. No, for sure. I worked with a client who was, she had not gotten married yet, but, they were in the process of meeting each other's children, spending time together, at each other's homes, just to, I guess they had begun the work of, pre-blending. What are you doing before you get married? Is that what that is? And a lot of these issues had come up. And as we coached, she realized that there were other things available to her other than being a mom. And just her view of family was, well, just culturally, everyone stepped in to be mom. Right. Yeah. And so she thought she was going to step in also when her stepchildren were with her to be mom as well. And she hadn't imagined any other role that was available to her. And so as we coached and she grew through the process and looked at her thoughts and realized that, there's 10 different roles that I could choose that would be amazing for my stepchildren. She actually then brought in her role as a teacher, because she was actually a teacher. So she was teacher, mentor, friend to hundreds of children over the years. Didn't feel any angst about it, because it was like, oh, no. They have their moms and dads. I'm here to just love them in this particular way. Yes. And when she was able to step into that role in her mind, it's like, oh, problem solved.
Yes, everything is fine now.
Everything is fine.
And husband hasn't and the ex hasn't changed, and the stepkids
hadn't changed. Nobody had.
No one changed.
Just changed her thought, and it was just so beautiful to see. I mean, she was in the day that like transformation happened. Like, she was in tears because it was just so much relief. The burden of trying to be mom was taken, and it wasn't working. Her husband's ex didn't want her to be mom. The kids didn't want her to be mom.
And a lot of times husband also doesn't want us to be mom.
Right. And her children, what's interesting is in this scenario, she was using so much energy trying to be mom to children who didn't want her to be mom, that there was a little bit of neglect starting to happen. with her
Yes.
own children because of just that energy that was going to something that was impossible. And so
Mhm.
once she shifted in her mind, it was just like everything was evenly distributed. Everyone was like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. I want a mentor, kind of auntie type person who doesn't tell on me and who doesn't get too much in my business. And it was perfect.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because what I hear so often from clients is, I don't know who I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so they're always looking for their husband to tell them or their stepkids to tell them or the exes. Like they're always looking for someone else to tell them who they're supposed to be. And they're constantly walking on eggshells and people pleasing, and they feel so terrible.
Yeah.
Instead of just deciding for themselves, hey, this is who I want to be. If I could be anybody, like we do get to choose who we are and how we show up. And when we take that power back, oh, it feels so much better.
It does. It really does.
Looking for everyone else to tell me who I'm supposed to be in the world.
Yeah, that's so good. So you work with them on like, okay, what are your thoughts that you're thinking that's causing you all this pain? I think that's a really amazing first step, is to say what's actually going on inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times as women, we don't actually take the time to do that.
Oh yeah,
it's
like
easy kind of fix everything.
Yes, always. We're always looking outside of ourselves for the answers. Yeah. Trying to control all the people. And when I say control, I'm not talking about we're being controlling. When I say control, it's like, I just want everyone to be happy.
Yes.
Like that sounds nice, but it is like, you're always trying to control how people are going to respond and react.
How they're feeling, what their experience is.
It doesn't work. We end up driving ourselves crazy and totally depleting ourselves so that now it's harder to show up the way we want to because we've been so focused outside instead of inside.
Yeah. So that first step of going inside, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What's causing all this pain? Kind of putting it all on the table, right? And then what do you do after that? So it's like, oh, does this thought feel bad? This is what's caused. I mean, when you think this thought, it's, it feels bad. Do you want to keep that? Do you want to change that? How do you then walk them through the next steps?
Yeah. So a lot of it, I mean, we use a tool, called the model, where it's like showing people what they create for themselves when they think certain thoughts. And sometimes that's what we need to see in order to change it. So like I've noticed every single time I think someone else is doing it wrong, I do it wrong every time. It never, ever, ever fails because it has me showing up in a way that's not me. That's not who I want to be. And that realization. So now every time my brain's like, oh, they're doing this wrong, they should do it different. I'm like, brain, we have been down this road enough times to know that the moment we start thinking someone else is doing it wrong, we're going to start doing it wrong. And we don't want to go there today.
Yeah.
And so like you're bringing that line of awareness up so that you can recognize your thinking earlier and earlier and make more conscious choices in the moment, instead of continuing to follow all your patterns.
Oh, that's so good. Awareness is like half of the cure. I don't know, 80% of the cure?
Yeah, maybe 90. Sometimes all it takes is me to like realize something is a thought instead of a fact, and it's like completely solved.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's not a fact. What? That's just been something I've been thinking.
Yes. And just, I'll digress a little bit. Recently, a thought cycled back to me that I thought I had taken care of, which is I don't have time. Just don't have time. And I was like, oh, brain, I see you over there. Here's what we're going to do. So I literally brought out a piece of paper. I said, brain, tell me all the things I don't have time for. And I know there's this long list of chores and work that I didn't have time for because he'd just been repeating to me, well, oh, we need to do that, but we don't have time. And then I was like, so now what do we have time for? Well, recently I had binge watched the show. I was like, oh, really? We have time for that?
We have time for that.
Nice. But it was really just a thought. It was just recycling the idea that I didn't have time. And our brains will do that. We'll just grab on a thought that we've thought for a long time and just regurgitate it at will.
Yeah. Even thoughts that, I mean, like, I think one of these situations where I realized something was a thought and not a fact was the thought, I don't love my stepson. And I hated that because I had so much judgment over myself. Like I should love him and all these things. And I just thought that was a fact. Like, I'm just telling you the news.
Yeah.
And the day that I realized that that's actually totally made up, it was like, it opened up so many possibilities because I was willing to question it and look at it and go, wait a minute. if I didn't love him, I wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Like there was so much evidence that I wasn't even seeing because I just thought it was a fact that I didn't love him.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I love that you brought that up because I imagine that when you had the thought, I don't love my stepson, you were probably feeling bad, beating yourself up, potentially
Totally.
like judging yourself.
So much judgment.
Do you find that your clients have a lot of judgment for themselves in this situation when they're blending families?
Absolutely. Because I think as moms, we like to we're the nurturers. We create the family culture. And if the family culture looks broken, we take that all on ourselves. Like it's all our fault. We're doing it wrong. Women, we're so easy to judge ourselves. We're so quick to do that.
Yeah.
And it's never helpful because we feel terrible. And when we feel terrible, we're not out serving our family and doing amazing things because we feel terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're having this whole experience in our heads. I'm just amazed at how much of an experience I can have in my head.
Yes.
I'm this isn't real. This is not in the real world.
Yeah. It's
this whole scenario
all made up. And yet it feels so real because our thoughts create all of our emotions, which we're feeling in our body. And so we think it's real and it's not. It's just a totally made up world we're living in our head.
Yeah.
And if we can drop some of those that feel so terrible, it's so much easier to show up and create what you actually want.
Yes, I love that. What do you find your clients typically want with their families? Coming in with their blended family, what is the vision that they usually want? What do they want to see? Just in a real way. I mean, my concept of blending the family is a lot less. Our kids were mostly grown, so we didn't do a whole lot of this work. Mm-hmm. But typically, what are they looking for? What is the end result?
Yeah, usually when I ask, what does success look like to you? Mm-hmm. I get some version of unity. So it's me and my husband would be on the same page. We would present a united front. We would feel like one family instead of two families living in the same house. It's some version of, I just want to feel like a family. Yes. United together instead of this hodgepodge we have going on.
Yeah. And they can create their version of that.
Oh, absolutely. Because the only thing keeping us from that is what we're thinking about it. We start off thinking we're separate. And then our brains, because of the way our brains work, if we have this particular activating system, it's like when you get a new car and suddenly you see that new car everywhere. Yes. And obviously that car was already everywhere. You just never saw it before.
Yep.
So when we start blending families, we get remarried and we start out with the instructions for our brain, we are separate and we have to blend together. It's you're already telling your brain, look for all the ways we're separate. And that's what your brain will find.
Oh, that is mind-blowing. So good. So really where we're coming from is I know we just said that for the last 15 minutes. I'm sorry, my mind just got blown again. So when we come in thinking, hey, I need to blend this family, we've already assumed that the family is separate.
Yes.
Oh, so good.
And our brain always, it likes us to be right more than it likes us to be happy. It will do whatever you tell it to. So if you tell it to look for separate, it will find separate. Yeah. And if you tell it to look at all the ways we're already a family. What it is a family? What does that even mean? And remembering, hey, I get to decide. I can decide what a family is and just decide we already are one.
Yeah, we're the new standard. Yeah. Someone decided the first standard. So
tell your brain to look for that. And blending will be about 1,000 times easier because your brain is on board for looking for the ways you're already a family instead of all the ways you're not.
Oh my God. That is gold. I'm just okay, I got coached on my podcast today. I'm going to go sit down and write all the ways that my family is awesome. And we're already everything I want.
Yes.
We're good to go. I love that. Mindy, oh my gosh, so many gems, so much wisdom. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Sharing all of this. You gave a lot of great advice to those who are dating about being themselves. If you were to give, and I know you already said so much about blending families, just your last piece of advice, either to women who are dating or women who are, already remarried and are, building these families, what would you like to say? Just something that maybe I haven't asked you yet.
I would say, remember, it's always going to be 50-50. Always. Life is 50% positive, 50% negative. So when you're single, it's 50-50. And when you're dating, it's 50-50. And when you're remarried, it's 50-50. And whether the person you're dating has kids or not, it's going to be 50-50. It always is.
Yeah.
So just go all in on whatever your 50-50 looks like right now.
Yes.
Like the women you said were afraid to start dating because they didn't want to deal with blended families.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be 50-50 either way. There are like amazing things about being in a blended family, and there are amazing things about being single, and there are amazing things about dating. It's always going to be 50-50. So just go all in on whatever your flavor looks like right now, and know that you can always choose any flavor you want. It's just always going to be 50-50.
I love it. That's so good. Mindy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you? Maybe spell out one or two of your social media handles for those who are listening and just want to pull it up right away. And of course, we'll link all of those in the show notes.
Yeah, of course. You can find me on Instagram at Mindy Neal Coaching. It's Neal. You can also, if you liked this idea about unity, I do have a free masterclass that you can go and watch right now. It's called How to Create Unity in Your Blended Family Without Relying on Anyone Else to Change. And you just go to blendedfamilyunity.com.
So good. I love it. I love it. I'm like, of course, unity. So good. Thank you, Mindy. I really appreciate having you on today. Listeners, please follow Mindy. You can find all of her information in the show notes today. I want to thank you all for your time and attention, and I will see you on the podcast next time. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to sadecurry.com to get started. That's SADECURRY.com. I'll see you inside.